Thank you very much. I wouldn't say I'm quite conversational yet, but I'm working on it with Duolingo. So thanks for everybody for staying late for this talk. I know it's been a long, exciting day. I'm going to talk about coding for social good. This talk actually was inspired by a teacher at my children's school. I'm in Pittsburgh, obviously. Duolingo's in Pittsburgh. His name is David Nassar. He's now the head of the computer science department at this school. It's a high school. It's not a college. So it's pretty amazing that this school actually has a computer science department. You may know or you may not know. It's not every school has computer science in high school. I don't know how many of you had it in high school. The fact that I found, the factoid that I found on the internet was that 9 out of 10 schools do not have any computer science or any programming classes, which I think is pretty crazy. So when this teacher, David Nassar, started, CS, computer science, was just an elective at this school. It was not a required course like math and science and history and even foreign languages. And what he noticed was two things. He noticed two things. First was that most of the kids in the classes were boys. For some reason, girls were not taking the computer science and programming classes. The second thing he noticed was that most people that he ran into didn't even really know what computer science was. They didn't know what the difference between computer science and programming. They didn't know all the amazing things that you could do with computer science and programming. So he did two things. One is he started telling people what computer science was. I remember there was a talk for the parents that I went to where he gave a presentation that talked about all the different applications of computer science and programming. The second thing he did was that he made these courses required for all kids who went through the school at the same level as the other core subjects like math and science and so on. And I guess there was actually a third thing he did, which was really important. He added some new introductory courses for how computer science could be applied so that when kids were taking programming and computer science for the first time, they could choose between applications of programming to music and the arts, or applications of programming to science and math, or applications to the humanities. So they could really see how this could connect with others of their interests. So inspired by him, today I'm going to talk about one area of application of computer science and software engineering. I'm going to talk about coding for social good. So I'm going to talk about a few different sectors where there are companies with strong missions for coding for social good. I'm going to talk about the hard problems they're working on. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about what kinds of job opportunities at these places, because this might be interesting to you. The 4 sectors that I'm going to talk about today are health, education, philanthropy, and government. I'm going to pick one company from each of these areas to talk about. I could have picked out of dozens more from each area, but I picked these 4 just for the sake of this talk. The first company in the health sector is a company called Cardiogram that I'm going to talk about today. So Cardiogram, their mission is twofold. First, they help users understand what their heart is telling them and helping them thus to live a healthier lifestyle. The second thing they do is they use the heart rate data that they collect from their users to screen for cardiac disease. So a little bit more about Cardiogram. There's an Apple Watch app that you can get from Cardiogram. If you have this Apple Watch app, it will measure your heart rate through the course of the day. It measures your heart rate about 200 times per day using a technique called photoplasmography. And then if you're wearing this app, you can actually go in and look and see how your heart rate changes over the course of the day. So you can see, for example, that when you're giving a talk, your heart rate might go up a little bit because you're a little bit stressed, like I might be right now. Or you might see that it turns out that when you're eating spicy food, your heart rate goes up. And of course, vice versa, if you're relaxing, reading a book, not giving a talk, your heart rate kind of goes down over time, and you can actually go into the app and annotate by activity type and visualize your heart rate. The other thing this app does is it encourages you to acquire new habits to have a healthier heart and to invite your friends to share these habits with you. So for example, it encourages you to pick a habit like yoga, sleeping more, meditating, exercising like running or biking. And then you can see what the effect is on your overall health, your overall heart health. The other thing you can do with this app is you can opt in to sharing your heart data. And this is where I think things get really interesting. Cardiogram uses the heart data from hundreds of thousands of its users to build models to screen for cardiac disease. One of the diseases they're looking at is an ailment called atrial fibrillation. So I'm going to take a step back here and explain what atrial fibrillation is at a very high level. So very briefly, atrial fibrillation is an ailment of the heart where there's electrical chaos in the upper chambers of the heart. This electrical chaos can lead to blood clots that can go to the brain and cause stroke. It can also cause the lower chambers to beat fast and erratically. People who have atrial fibrillation, the kinds of symptoms they feel is they feel their heart beating erratically, irregularly. They may feel very, very tired, and they may get short of breath when exercising, or even just going up the stairs or walking. They can also potentially feel no symptoms at all. And that's dangerous because with atrial fibrillation, the risk of stroke goes up quite high. It goes up by 5 times, and there's also 3 times risk of heart attack if untreated. Interestingly, to all of us who may be working ourselves too hard, the risk of atrial fibrillation goes up by 2.6 times if you don't get enough sleep. The prevalence of this ailment is pretty small for younger folks, 2% for under 65, almost 10% for over 65 in the US. 1 of 4 of us will develop this in the course of our lifetimes. So how is this typically diagnosed? If somebody feels that they have an erratic heartbeat, they'll probably go in and see their doctor. Their doctor will prescribe a diagnostic tool called an EKG. So the patient will wear a heart monitor in their doctor's office while this EKG test is being done. This provides a very accurate data point to demonstrate whether or not the patient has atrial fibrillation. The problem is that patients with this go in and out of atrial. So when they're in the doctor's office, they may not actually be demonstrating any symptoms at all. Now, what's pretty cool about a wearable like an Apple Watch is that it can be tracking you all through the course of the day and is more likely to catch something like atrial fibrillation. So now we have this company called Cardiogram with 100,000 users and over 10 billion measurements from these people. This is a very large, noisy data set, 10 billion measurements, but in addition to this, Cardiogram also has some gold standard labeled data. They have the clinical test results for 20 patients, and they're working with UCSF to get more labeled data. So this lends itself to using techniques from machine learning to build models using semi-supervised machine learning to build an algorithm that can distinguish between the pattern of heart rate variability in normal heart rhythm and that in atrial fibrillation. Some of you here, I'm sure many of you here have taken machine learning, so this is a pretty cool application of machine learning to improve medicine. At this point, their model can detect 9 out of 10 AFib cases. That's pretty good, but to be of clinical use, it still needs to get higher. So they're working to improve their techniques, get more labeled data, and get it to the point where it's of clinical value. So this is an example of a company in the sector of health that can use computer science to solve some pretty interesting problems that really can make a difference in the world. Here's a kind of position that Cardiogram has. These are the kind of opportunities that they have. So of course they're looking for machine learning engineers, and they're also looking for front-end software engineers to build the actual Appleware apps and iPhone apps. Now I'm going to talk about a company in the education space. Big surprise, I'm going to talk about Duolingo. How many people have heard of Duolingo? That's great, almost everybody. The mission of Duolingo is to provide free language education for the world. The idea is to be able to give everyone access to a private tutor experience through technology. There are over 1.2 billion people learning a language across the world, and the majority of these are doing so to gain access to better opportunities. What's pretty cool is that Duolingo is used by some of the richest people in the world, like Bill Gates and Hollywood stars, and at the same time it's being used by public school students in developing countries. Actually, this Duolingo, I'm not sure how many people know this, but it came out of Carnegie Mellon University. Hopefully not too much of a rival, so I can mention it here. So it came out of Carnegie Mellon University. It was actually, so it was created by Luis von Ahn, who is still a professor there and also our CEO, and Severin Hacker, who was then his PhD student. So this actually started as a PhD student project. So a few stats. About half our users use Duolingo to learn English. And that's because English, for many people, opens up new opportunities and can be the path to a better life. So for example, last year, I took a trip to India with some of my colleagues to learn from people there how we can customize Duolingo to their needs. There are a lot of people in India who would like to learn English because it gives them opportunities for jobs that pay much better. One example of a kind of job for which English makes a big difference is being a driver. When we were there, we often we would often go into an Uber or a taxi or have a paid driver. A lot of foreigners who go there might hire a paid driver for the week. Hotels, you could get a driver through a hotel. And there was a huge difference in the pay between somebody who knew English and somebody who didn't. It was 10 times or more difference in the pay between somebody who knew English and somebody who didn't. So those are the kinds of people that we would like Duolingo to be useful for in India. A few more stats. We have 68 different courses in all, and we have 22 new ones that are in progress, including Japanese and Swahili. Our top 5 courses are learning English from Spanish, learning English from Portuguese, and then after that, a few courses for learning from English, Spanish, French, and German. So a common request that we get from our users is that people would like to practice conversation in addition to using Duolingo as is today. The idea here is, if you're an English speaker learning French, say, we could pair you up with a French speaker learning English, and maybe the two of you can kind of learn from each other. So this sounds like a really elegant idea, and we've tried this kind of thing in the past, but we find that most people actually don't like it when they try it. And the reason is because it seems like something like 3/4 of people who try it are kind of embarrassed to speak in a foreign language with another person. It causes a kind of social anxiety to try it speaking in a language you don't know and revealing how bad you still are at it. So this is why we decided to work on conversational bots. Because with a conversational bot, there's no need to be anxious. It's just a machine. It's not going to judge you. And we actually think that this has the potential to be the future of language education. We think that just maybe people could learn a new language just by talking with a bot that is smart enough. Imagine a bot that is smart enough to adjust its level of conversation to you, smart enough to understand broken English or broken Spanish or broken French, smart enough to gently correct you when you make mistakes, and smart enough to remember and build on past conversations. So that's a pretty big, lofty goal. We have to start somewhere. So we're starting at a step towards that high, lofty goal. In October, we launched the first version of Duolingo bots. The Duolingo bot, the user interface for this looks like your typical messaging app. So it feels like you could be chatting with a friend, but you're actually chatting with a Duolingo language bot. And you're having simple conversations on topics of ordinary life, like ordering coffee, reserving a hotel room, going clothes shopping. At this point, we have several dozen conversations per language. The languages that we're live in are Spanish, French, German, and Portuguese is coming soon. Now, it looks like a common messaging app, but there are a few language-specific features for helping people learn languages. So for example, the bot talks to you. We use text-to-speech so the bot can talk to you in the language you're learning. You can also tap on any word in case you don't understand and get the translation. And then we have this pretty cool feature that we call Help Me Reply. If you're stuck, because when you try to speak in a foreign language, you get a little bit stuck, you can tap on Help Me Reply, and it will give you different alternatives of the next few things you might want to say. The last feature we have here is something we call Better Answer. So let's say, grammatical mistake, it would be understandable to a native speaker, but it's not quite right. The bot will understand you, move forward, but it'll say Better Answer and tell you how you could have said it grammatically correctly. Now, let's talk a little bit about what's happening under the hood. First, let me give you a little bit of an example conversation, a very, very simple conversation for a beginning language learner. Let's say the bot says, "Hi, here's one of my friends, Robert. Say hi to Robert." Now, what might somebody say in response to that? There's a lot of different things they could say. The simplest thing they might say is, "Hello, Robert," or they might say, "Hello, Robert, how are you?" Those are two slightly different responses. And even just for saying, "Hello, Robert," there's probably dozens or hundreds, even thousands of ways of saying, "Hello, Robert." The same thing for saying, "Hello, Robert, how are you?" Then so for each of those possible responses, we encode the potential thousands of different ways of saying it into a compact representation. We actually call those compact forms. You can see on the screen an example compact form for French that expands out into many different ways of saying that. So we have these writers who use what we call a conversation editor to map out the conversation. For each thing the bot might say, there are many different possible answers. And then for each thing that you answer and reply, the bot has to know what to say next. I'm kind of reverse engineering it for you here. It's kind of like choose your own adventure if you've ever played that. So there's nothing magical here, right? There's no AI at this point, no machine learning. But what we do have is something that algorithmically is pretty complex. Since we have so many possible answers here, we have to be able to encode these in an efficient form. And then on the client side, in the iOS app, we have to be able to search over the space of possible answers very efficiently so that the bot can answer in real time. So that's the V1 bot, which is just a very basic, almost rules-based system. Now we're working on something a little more sophisticated, a little more interesting from the computer science point of view. The biggest complaint that we've gotten from users, and most actually, the response has been pretty favorable, but the biggest complaint we've gotten is that it feels too restrictive. So we've had to encode all the possible answers, right? So if a user tries to say something that we haven't foreseen, then what it feels like to the user is you're typing away, you've got your answer, "Hi, Robert, how are you? Would you like to go to the park?" And all of a sudden on wood, it gets stuck and it says, "Not an accepted word." And then you have to backspace and try something else that it understands and keep on going until you finally pick one of the answers that we've predicted you might try. So this feels very restrictive. It feels like you're talking to a computer program that doesn't really understand you. So that what we're working on now is to make it much less restrictive while still keeping those language learning aids like Help Me Reply. So we're working on being able to understand free text replies while still doing things like grammar corrections and Help Me Reply. So here what we're doing is first, when you give an answer, when you reply to the bot, first we see if it matches one of the set of accepted answers. If it does, good, we're done. If it doesn't, then what we do is see if it matches an almost correct answer. And the set of almost correct answers we're able to automatically create based on the set of answers. So let's say in French and Spanish and Portuguese and German, all those languages, there's a notion of masculine or feminine words. And those are just really a pain for English speakers because the words that come in front of those nouns change depending on whether the noun is masculine or feminine. And language learners always get that wrong. But from the perspective of somebody who you're speaking to, they'll probably still understand you even if you get that wrong. So we're able to automatically extend our set of accepted answers to include little word switches like that. We also account for conjugating verbs incorrectly. It's really hard to learn how to conjugate verbs in a different language. And so a lot of other things like that we're able to encode automatically. So the next thing we do is see if we can match to a almost but not quite right answer. After that, if your answer still doesn't match, then we're looking at fuzzy matching techniques. One of those would be some kind of edit distance matching for the answers we know are correct or almost correct. The next step after that is using some machine learning to train an algorithm to classify your answer into one of the possible paths through the tree. So that's a little bit of a taste of one project we're working on Duolingo that uses machine learning that's live today. We have, here's some examples of the kinds of people who work at Duolingo. These are openings that we have right now. So you can see there's a broad range of opportunities from native app building, Android, iOS, also backend, also web. And then we also have openings for positions like product manager. The product manager is the person who figures out what the product should look like, and often those people also have CS degrees. All right, moving on. The next sector that I'm going to talk about is philanthropy. Has anybody here heard of Give Directly? Okay, good. I get to tell you about Give Directly. I first heard about it about 3.5 years ago when I was listening to This American Life on NPR, and they had a show about Give Directly. It's a really interesting charity. Most charities, what they do is they go to a village that has serious needs, let's say a village in Africa, and they go and help build wells, or they give people cows with the idea that this will really make a big difference in their lives. And it often does. The idea behind Give Directly, though, is very different. Their idea is that people in need best know what they need the money for. So they actually take money from donors and give it directly to people. It's actually kind of revolutionary for a charity. Now, they're not assuming that this works. They actually have done a bunch of scientific studies or collaborated with others for scientific studies to show how well it works. One thing I wanted to mention is that Give Directly was actually founded by Harvard and MIT students right here in Cambridge. So how does Give Directly work? The first thing they need to do is identify those people who are in need. It's pretty interesting. What they do is they use satellite imagery to identify in huts with thatched roofs as opposed to metal roofs, because people with metal roofs have enough money to have a metal roof. They started out at a relatively small scale with thousands of recipients. They identified the recipients through the imagery, and then they transfer money directly to the people in need via electronic payments. So the recipient and then goes and collects the cash from a mobile money agent. There have been a lot of studies about the efficacy of doing direct payments like this, some that are independent of Give Directly and some that are in collaboration with them. Some of these studies look at the effect of monthly payments, and some look at the effect of lump sum payments. And these studies have shown that the giving directly is, so the studies, I should say, people were given money directly with control arm where people did not receive any money. They found a positive impact, especially on children. They found that giving money per month is more likely to improve food security, while lump sums are more likely to be spent on durables. They also found that these cash transfers increase schooling and decrease child labor. They looked as well at the impact of purchases of alcohol and tobacco and so on, and found that there was no change. GiveDirectly's next step is to do a 12-year controlled experiment for basic income. Basic income means giving people enough money to live off of without any other resources. So they're going to conduct a 12-year basic income study. GiveDirectly's next step is that they want to scale from thousands of people to millions of people. Now, they're not really set up for this. They're a nonprofit. They're able to give directly money to thousands of people, but not to millions of people. They were actually tracking all of this in spreadsheets. It's really ad hoc. And what they decided was to be able to build a platform that they needed to spin off the creation of the platform to a for-profit company. And this for-profit company is called Segovia. And this is the company that's actually building the enterprise platform that can pay millions of people securely and efficiently and rapidly. And on top of this infrastructure, Segovia has built real-time analysis and reporting tools. The clients for Segovia include charities like GiveDirectly and Save the Children, but also governments and businesses. So here, the interesting computer science problem here is to be able to build this enterprise platform that can integrate across many different payment providers and that can secure sensitive data against both malicious attacks and accidental exposure, as well as building these analysis and reporting tools. Within GiveDirectly itself, a software engineering project that they have is something called the GD Live Newsfeed. And this is a live newsfeed on their website that lets donors connect with the people who are receiving the money and see how it's affecting their lives. So here are some of the job opportunities today at both GiveDirectly and Segovia. Both places are looking for full-stack software engineers. And at Segovia, this payments platform is a really good job for somebody who's interested in systems. The last sector that I'm going to talk about today is government. There's a nonprofit here called Code for America. Have folks heard of Code for America? A few people? Great. It's presumably the name comes from, it's a spin-off of the name for Teach for America, which has been around for quite a bit longer. The mission of Code for America is to build technology to help governments build services that work for the people who need them the most. Code for America is working with hundreds of local governments and municipalities. So Code for America does a couple different things. It works on its own projects, and then it also creates a platform for volunteers to build services in their own local governments and municipalities. Here are a few of the projects that people at Code for America work on. The first one is called Get CalFresh. It's a free service, free nonprofit service that Code for America has created to help Californians apply for food stamps. You know, this is your typical bureaucratic process that in the past required a lot of paperwork and a lot of delays, and now it's possible for people to apply online in 10 minutes and schedule an eligibility interview. It might seem like a small thing, but it really cuts through bureaucracy and makes a lot of people's lives easier. The second free online service that they've created is something called Clear My Record. So this is a tool for folks who have previously had convictions, are out of jail, and it turns out that once somebody's been out of jail for a while and has had no issues, they can actually go and clear their record as if the conviction had not happened. This makes obviously a big difference in their lives in terms of being able to get jobs in the future. This has been the kind of thing that has been really, really hard to do in the past. It's a very complex process and involves working with an attorney, so it's something that's really hard for people to be able to do, even though it's so important. So this online service allows people to go online, get pre-screened online, have that information sent to an attorney. The attorney can use the tool to pull up all the information, and then there's a relatively quick turnaround for the attorney to get back to the person and then have them follow the next steps. The third online service they've created is something called ClientCom. This is again to work with folks who have come out of jail, and it helps the caseworkers for people who are on probation to communicate to their each caseworker has dozens of people they're working with. The probation officer is trying to keep them out of jail and getting back into the course of life and productive. So one of the big problems that case managers face is that the people that they're working with don't have fixed phone numbers, so keeping in contact over phone is hard. Code for America has created an app that makes it, on the web, that makes it easy for case managers to keep track of many, many people. In addition to working on these projects, Code for America supports a platform for volunteers. This platform is called Code for America Brigades. And these are volunteer groups that collaborate with local government to build all sorts of tools to help with local civic issues. And in fact, there's a local brigade right here. It's called Code for Boston. It meets in Cambridge right here every Tuesday night. The local brigade here has worked on a bunch of different things. One example is a Cambridge energy app, which helps residents track and reduce their energy bills. Another example of a civic technology project that's nationwide is called data.gov. So data.gov is the home of the US government's open data. There are over 160,000 different data sets. And the data.gov code base has built out a bunch of tools and resources that help scientists conduct research and develop web and mobile apps and design data visualizations. What are some of the interesting and hard technical problems in civic tech? Well, one set of problems are around building the cloud services and the tools to support the different Code for America projects. Another hard technical problem is user experience, how to build an interface to government that is simple, beautiful, and easy to use, in contrast with a lot of the legacy government tools, which are pretty awful to use. In fact, sometimes hidden behind paper forms and lots of need to make requests. The third problem here is data integration. A lot of the government data is hidden inside of legacy IT systems, modern databases, and integrated together into a new system which can be easily accessed and analyzed by end users. Here are some of the job opportunities you can find if you look at Code for America's website. They're looking for software engineers and also a product manager. And then, of course, from the perspective of students, what's really interesting here is that you can volunteer. So volunteering is a great opportunity to both work on a meaningful project, but also to get practice in your software engineering skills, have your code go into GitHub and be available for potentially future employers to see. A few parting words. So today I chose to talk about coding for social good and companies and nonprofits focusing on this area to give you an idea of the opportunities here. But really, I could have given a very similar but different talk on other areas where CS and software engineering play a large role. For example, companies and research and nonprofits focused on history and language, or mathematics and economics, or chemistry and biotechnology, or art and music. Any of these could have made a really great talk. So I explore all of you as you're finishing up your undergraduate education, to explore the broad range of opportunities that are out there for people of your abilities, with your knowledge and skills. We're all here privileged to be in a field that is just bubbling with opportunity. And with your background, you can explore any of these. Look around, see what moves you, see what you find meaningful, what the challenging problems are, what interests you the most, and how you can best make a difference in the world. Any questions? Somebody's got to have a question. Yes.
Wait, 1 second. Could you pass this down and could you stand up?
Oh, okay, sure. For Duolingo, have you considered voice recognition?
Okay, yeah, great question. So have we considered voice recognition? So in Duolingo today, there are some of the exercises that have you speak, and we recognize whether or not you're speaking correctly or not. So there's an opportunity to speak. Maybe you're asking about the Duolingo bots. Yeah, so I actually forgot to mention that, so thank you for asking this question. So we're working on free text replies, and once we've nailed that, the nice thing is that we'll be able to turn on voice recognition. So you'll be able to speak, and we'll be able to process that as a free text reply and move on. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks everybody for staying late for this talk.